what community, what love, what looking out for each other looks like. Who is continuously pushing us to reimagine not only the society, but ourselves, right? We can't build a new world unless we're willing to look at ourselves and examine what we need to change in ourselves as well. And one of the folks who helps us do that constantly, our loved one, our sibling. Give it up for Future!
Hello, family. In 2018, the results from a test came in. It was called The Morality Machine by MIT. In this, 40 million decisions were made in this test by people from 233 different countries. And they asked questions about how we would program driverless vehicles. What decisions would they make, would we make, to teach technology on who was worth saving and who was not? You see, our own biases and limitations are built into the technology that we do today, that we create today. And we see that in our algorithms. We see that in facial recognition technology. The limitations of us, of our ability to see each other as full beings. We build that into the technology that we create. And so, from these results, from 233 different countries and 40 million different decisions, some things that were relatively startling came up, but wouldn't necessarily be shocking to us. In it, across the globe, we would save a younger person instead of an older one. And we would save dogs over cats. But what was really interesting is, of course, they wouldn't ask questions that centered around race. What was really interesting was, in this order, older people, dogs, criminals, cats. Criminals were killed almost every time, right above cats. We need to think about what that means. The construction of criminal. And the construction of criminal under capitalism. We need to think about what that means today, in a moment and in a time when billionaires are pandemic profiteering and millions of people are facing eviction. Millions more are starving. And instead we have accepted a construction of criminal that looks like me and that looks like you, a construction of criminal based on class, on poverty. I want to be really clear about what I am saying. Our relationship to morality is very much informed by wealth and criminality. And so we look at each other as criminals before we look at our own administration, before we look at corporations. We look at each other when we know that capitalism is criminal. We know that corporations are criminal. There is something deeply disturbing in that while we debate morality, oh, and aren't we just, on who is allowed to be prayed for and who is not, on who should be spared and who shouldn't. And the responsibility of morality is always placed on those who are denied fair treatment, denied equality, denied equity, denied inclusion. Oh, but we must always be so graceful. We must always offer grace. We have to wonder about why the project of whiteness is so deeply invested on a high road, a road that they have never taken, a road that's never been seen. Across the globe, we all agree that criminals don't deserve life, despite the fact that we know that criminality is informed by class and informed by color. Not about morality, not about justice, not about ethics. Class and color, that's it. What does that say about how pervasive that is? How much work, how much money had to go in to make us believe lies about each other? So that we are looking at each other instead of looking up at the power structures that inform our relationship to each other. There is not going to be another stimulus check before the presidential election. People in this country, working class people and poor people, are not worth it to this administration or to Congress to see a decision through. Chuck Schumer and our so-called champions have failed to do any and everything that they can do to stop the nomination, or rather, the confirmation coming up at the end of the month. And while that is happening, billionaires continue to profit. While that is happening, our people are being killed on the streets by police officers. You want to know how deeply insidious and pervasive class is and color? Oh, it's so clear. It's so deeply pervasive. I want to remind you that so many of these sheriffs and so many of these cops are actually from working class families. It goes so deep. It goes so deep that they would position themselves in proximity to power that they'll never have and that they'll never own. And look at you and look at me as monsters instead of the corporations that would keep people in poverty, that would poison water, that would further build and develop technologies that rend us skin from sinew to make a buck. So, we have to be really clear, because the reason that police exist in the first place is because we have a demand for criminals in our country and in our society. And we have in that the construction of criminals and criminality. And criminals are informed by class and color. So we have got to be really clear that in that construction, we have to look at ourselves and each other and be really clear about what we mean when we say defund the police. And what we're actually talking about, people here defund, what we're talking about is decency and dignity. That is what we are talking about. Because the answer to these class and color issues has been to throw cops at it. And we have settled for that. The time when the Democratic Party changed to a place where they can never come back from when they became centrist and then moved ever right was around the Clinton administration when they decided that they were going to be tougher on crime than the Republican Party would be. And that was the only way that they could win. The construction of criminality, and it led to a betrayal that we have never recovered from, decades and decades more. A skyrocketing of criminals, and yet crime doesn't go up. You see, when it's built around economies, you create a demand. You build beds in prisons based on test scores. You create a demand. It's not about whether crime exists. They need the construction of criminals. And you need only look to class and color to provide an endless supply of criminals. And we have accepted that for too long. And I want to be really clear. If this moment has brought home anything, it is that we refuse to accept it any longer. And when I say we, I mean every one of us who would identify across the political left. We are done with half measures, half answers, and resolutions. We don't want resolution, we want revolution. And so we have to go deep into our very understanding of morality, because so much of Western morality informs what we know about each other, and more specifically, Christian morality, Western morality, the idea that there are good people and there are bad people, and that good people are people with money and fair skin, people who are wealth, people who work harder, not people who are born into it, even though we know that people inherit wealth and others inherit struggle. But we've got to ask ourselves, what else do they inherit? They inherit apathy. They inherit division. Because that is what class is informed by. Some will betray the system that they were born into, because that is what the betrayal of the project of whiteness entails. You must turn your eyes away from comfort, because comfort leads to moral decay. And some of them find themselves on the streets with us. And there are those of us who inherited struggle and would seek out those comforts, like cops and sheriffs. Even if it means succumbing to a kind of moral apathy, a moral decay, even if it means standing on the necks and the backs and the bodies of people who look like me and people who look like you. Because remember that criminality has nothing to do with morality. Criminality is built on class and color. And we would throw people away the minute that we decide that they are criminal. And the only reason that cops exist in the first place is to deal with those who are criminal. And I want to be really clear. We got to be really clear about what is criminal today. Criminal today is being a part of the radical left. Criminal today is fighting back against police brutality. Criminal today means fighting for bread on people's tables. Criminal today means fighting against the eviction of poor people. Criminal today means trying to fund schools and defund the police and healthcare. Oh, we are hungry, and we are hungry for justice. Let's be really clear that in this system, in this society, we are all criminal, and that our heroes who had courage were criminal too. There isn't a single person that we look up to, a single ancestor that we wouldn't uphold, that we wouldn't lift up, that wasn't a criminal. Fighting against the status quo makes you a criminal. So we have got to fight back against this idea that criminals are worth less than we are, that we would avert our eyes from those who are in pain, from those who have been rejected from society, because we are here, because we have been rejected from society. And so we are claiming each other. We are claiming courage. We are claiming conviction. We are fighting class. We are fighting capitalism. We are fighting corporations. In the absence of true leadership in our Congress, we will have courage. are fighting against a belief system that would make it so that we only understand each other in hierarchies based on worth, and a false construction of morality that would make us betray each other on the idea of criminality. And remember that criminality is informed by color and class, and that our first betrayals of each other were informed by class. It was the wealthy and the status quo who understood that they could buy out white servants to ensure that they didn't work with black slaves. And they would use those white servants to fight Native and indigenous people on the outskirts of a newly founded America to further claim their land while they sat back and got rich and wealthy, and while their power became more and more concentrated. And we are living in the legacy and the afterlife of that betrayal today. So we have got to continue to betray bigotry and realize that we can never be bought out again. And I'll tell you how I know that. There is no amount of buying out that can now bridge the gap between us and billionaires. It doesn't exist. There are too many bodies piled in between. Oh, but I'll tell you this. They thought that they were building a grave for us. No, we were building a trench. And we're ready now. We are done. We are done with half measures, half solutions, half loves. We will not accept resolutions. We want revolution. So be clear about what fight this is. No matter who gets confirmed, we will vote because we understand what we are up against, and we will cut off the head on the beast of bigotry. But then we have to deal with the body. And we will. And that means that we have to let go of the teachings of a system that would make us look at each other as less. It means that we have to free ourselves and liberate ourselves from teachings that had nothing to do with who we are. Remember that the mind is the muscle of the soul, and to think for oneself and to be oneself and to see each other as we are, not as we were told we are. That is the holiest work that one could do. Never forget that this work that we're doing, the work of life-giving and life-protecting, is sacred work. It is sacred work. Let them call us criminals, because remember that the only people that ever changed a damn thing in this world, historically and today, were criminals according to the status quo. So let us be that thing. Black Lives Matter.
And before we close out, we're going to have one last word from our good pastor, Pastor James Thomas. Come holler at us for a second, Pastor.